Hey, this is Mark with the Aquatic Nature Studio. So you've gone through the process of creating your sketch, implementing it on your aquarium. So now where do you go from there? Well, don't look at what I've already done because that's what you're going to be seeing soon, but you want to now go through the process of infilling all of those areas, those silhouetted areas that we created, those outlines, and we're going to go through that process right now. So let's just jump back in where we left off last time. Now, I want to take it back. I want to go back away from the golden spiral. I want to go back to the basic rule of thirds and use that as the basis for how this layout develops. So let's flip back over to that. So at this point in time, I reverted back to where we had placed it with the rule of thirds. Let's begin by understanding the selection of the stones and how those stones are going to require you to keep tweaking your layout. So I have a stone here that I believe is going to be my primary stone. I'm going to begin by playing with the size of this and understanding in relation to my drawing, how much of this stone can I actually fill into the void that I've created as the outline for the primary stone. So let's give that a go. So at this point, you don't need to be concerned about whether or not the primary stone that you selected is the perfect stone for this layout. So if I'm looking at what I had laid out originally on this canvas, I can see that the stone for the most part is not occupying the larger central portion of the layout. And so you can see that there's actually a void that's developed up in this upper area. And in order for us to infill this, we can either elevate this stone and bring it up higher, shifting perhaps this central focal point and maybe moving it over into this area. And what that would allow us to do is redirect the soil that's actually causing problems, because the dip is actually what's preventing us from building enough height into this layout. Now, another way you could go about it is you can take another different type of a stone, and remember that you're developing your layout based on how you're going to be interacting with it. So if this is photography based layout where you're only going to be seeing it from the front portion, it doesn't actually matter what the size is of the stone, but it's more about the perception of that size. So for instance, I have another stone here that is also a bit larger of a stone. However, it doesn't have as much of a mass in comparison to the stone that I already have inside this layout. So this is something that's actually quite thin of a stone. However, if depending on how you place it, it can actually give you the perception that this is a much larger stone than it actually is. Now, what that would allow you to do is it increases the planting area that you would have access to, but it also at the same time decreases the amount of supporting stones that you require in actually keeping this in place, and also how much soil you might have to relocate and play with and manipulate this layout. So let's swap out this stone for this new primary stone and see where we're at in this layout. And you can see again, it appears to be undersized. Now, we're actually in a pretty decent space right now where we can actually play with the height of this a bit more. And that is all because we still have a secondary stone that needs to be a supporting stone. And that's gonna allow us to probably build this up even higher. Now this piece here is not necessarily bigger than what I had originally placed in here, but it has certain features that will allow me to hide its size in such a way that will not actually be distracting from the layout, but should hopefully add to what I have already in this tank. So let's add this one. So now I've placed in my supporting stone, and you can see that I actually, based on this preliminary layout, I haven't... Now sometimes no matter how much you play with your stones, you're going to find that they're still not going to be able to remain stable. So in order to counter that, in the case of this layout, I'm finding that this stone it's actually one too far forward for me, but it's causing an issue as far as keeping stability with the primary stone. So in order to counter that, I'm going to use some smaller stones that will be kind of like working preemptively as a detail for this layout, but at the same time it's going to be providing me with the support that I require. So we're trying to still maintain the central image that we were working with, that primary sketch, but we're going to be continually tweaking it and identifying the locations that are going to allow this layout to actually function properly. I've now introduced this smaller supporting stone, and the detail is already slowly starting to come together with some of these areas over here. You're going to want to perhaps keep redeveloping this area later on as you do some fine detailing with some finer stones. It's going to give you the textures that you're looking for as far as an aged in look of the landscape or the layout. Now, I'm pretty happy with where we're at right now. The spire of this primary stone is a little bit too vertical in my opinion. It could easily do much better with being extended out further. However, I don't actually want to utilize any glues of any sort, so I'm trying to keep it a little bit more natural in the placement of how I'm actually going to be working with this layout. Now, there are still some secondary stones that are missing, one over here that I'm going to be working with next, and we'll start developing what that area is now going to look like. So when you're thinking again about like a painting, there are certain focal points that an artist is drawing your eye to, and from there your eye begins to dance around the painting. Now, depending on how you go about selecting the details and the way that you place your details, you can either hide certain features or you can accentuate certain features. We're trying to strengthen the landmass that we've been building over here, and to counter this, you can either take another approach and you can harmoniously interact with the right side of the aquarium. So in the way that I've drawn this, I'm not taking the harmonious approach. I'm introducing some level of tension into the aquarium, which is causing an X shape. So now I'm going to move on to these secondary stones and developing their layout even further. So now I've made some general placements with this layout, and what I'm finding is the focal point again has shifted. So I'm going to eliminate the focal point and we're going to redirect it to where the true focal point is now being located. If there are certain lines in your aquarium that are matching up too well, you're going to find that the perception is going to be that you've created a large mass. So you've created a larger body than what is actually there. And this is again where you can play with smaller stones to make them appear as though, one, they have additional layers, but also the fact that you're adding either depth to them, height to them, or increasing the mass that is being perceived by the viewer. So in this case, I want to accentuate the fact that this isn't necessarily just one solid mass. There is some depth that I want to add to this. So I've left myself some planting areas in between these stones, and that's going to allow that depth to come out even further. So right now you want to think about, am I sloping the soil enough that I can accentuate that depth further? So now, at this point in time, I would advise you take a step back, you walk away for a while, maybe make it a week, go on vacation. I think I might go on vacation, maybe not. But give yourself time to process the image. It's going to look beautiful the second you put it together, but you're going to find that as you look at it over time, you're going to want to make changes. You're going to find imperfections in how you've perceived this layout. You're going to want to change things a little bit. I don't advise necessarily making drastic changes unless you feel that they're necessary, but I think for starters, at least give it a few days before you really make changes. Try and understand what you were doing. The takeaway from all of this is, yes, you can transpose your drawings into an aquarium, but the more you do this, the better you're going to get at it. So my final message to you is to continue to experiment. continue to develop yourself. Continue to develop the ideas that you have in your mind. Keep drawing. Keep playing with the hardscape. Work in your dojo. Work in your aquarium that hasn't been filled yet. Keep making those active steps to better your ideas. And so once again, this is Mark with the Aquatic Nature Studio. I hope you can join me in my next video. And if you enjoyed this piece of content, please like it down below, leave me a comment, let me know how you're going to be interacting with your aquarium from now on. So please like, comment, and until next time.